everybody. Welcome to Ad America. My name is Aninda, one of the eagles here in Ad America, and we welcome our audience joining us here. Ad America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn more about the United States. On this event, we'll be continuing our series of GED test preparation, reasoning through language arts. In the meantime, how about we spice things up a little bit with a trivia? The question for today is it true or false? Test takers can use a calculator for the GED exam. Well, take a guess and let us know your answer on our social media because in the end of the event, we'll do a live shout out for those of you who can guess the answer correctly. Other than that, feel free to take a selfie and tag us on our Instagram account. Well, without further ado, I will pass the floor to our facilitator, Zacharias Shatkam, GED qualified instructor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Hello and welcome everyone to another session of GED prep class by At America, reasoning through language arts, or as we all know it, English. Anyway, I'm going to share my screen. And do let me know if you can't see it, otherwise you should be able to see it. Anyway, this is session 10. So far we have studied 9 sessions, and in the 9 sessions that we have studied, we have learned about nonfiction, we have learned about reading them, we have learned about analyzing them, we have learned about all the topics that you can see here. All these topics, have been studied by us and we have learned them. I hope you have understood all of them. If you have any questions, please do let me know. Excuse me. First, we'll do a really short recap of last session. In the previous session, we spoke about inference and story structure. We said that inference basically means, understanding what the writer has implied or what is implied in the text. And story structure, we said that when different parts of a story come together and they form a structure, that's story structure. Anyway, so any story has all these 6 parts that we have mentioned here. These 6 parts. Moment of final suspense is not one of the main parts, by the way. That's why I said 6. And also inciting exposition or setup is usually the beginning of a story, which basically means, sets up the scene, tells you about the environment, a bit about the characters, a bit about the situation. And inciting incident is when a conflict is introduced. So when you see the sign of a conflict almost happening, that's when the incident or the conflict is being incited or being introduced. The next one is rising action. Rising action basically means, when the situation keeps getting worse for the main character or the characters involved or concerned in that incident that is introduced. Climax is basically the highest point of tension. So in this situation, whether something has been happening, something good has been happening. So this is the moment that this is the highest point of goodness in that story. And from then on, everything will fall down. And if things have been going really badly for the main character or characters involved, then this is the moment where things will start going well for them. So falling action is basically kind of either the most amount of happiness is kind of decreasing, or from the most amount of sadness, we kind of see happy moments or glimpse of happy moments. So the next one is a moment of final suspense. This is not usually used in conventional reading. So like when it's when the story talks about only one incident. This is not usually included in the story structure. But this is something which I will talk about in here. So this is something that you will see in movies and also books written to be continued usually. Anyway, so we have denouement or resolution. This is basically how this story ends. If the main character has seen something or has been through something really bad, or has been through something really great, this is the moment that you can see where the main character or all the characters involved were kind of affected by the incident that the story talks about, where all of them end up. Usually they end up either in a worse place or in a worse state than the beginning of the story, or sometimes better. In the previous session, I don't remember the name of the grandpa that we talked about, but we did talk about Sarah and also, let's say, Jim or Tim, I don't know, don't remember. Anyway, so we talked about them. We said, okay, the grandpa had a heart attack and then went to hospital. No, the doctor wasn't available, and then things started going really well for the grandpa from then on. The incident was heart attack, and after the heart attack, grandpa ended up in a kind of slightly worse state, because without that heart attack, the grandpa would have been better. Because as we all know, when you have a heart attack once, then you are susceptible to having another. Anyway, we talked about Sarah not being able to pay for GED, firstly being upset about not being able to apply to university because she did not have or does not have a high school diploma. But then her friend Jasmine, I guess, came and told her about this wonderful program called GED, where you can obtain your high school diploma or high school equivalence diploma, and then go and apply to university, because GED is accepted in the United States and most of the Western countries. And we also talked about where she went through this difficult moment of not being able to afford it because her parents were unemployed and all that. Anyway, those are all about those stories, and we talked about them in detail. We know how these stories go. In the previous session, if you remember, we talked about this pyramid that you see here. This pyramid, we say that, okay, this is where the exposition, or let's call it the setup, happens. So this is where the story is set up, and this is where conflict is introduced. This is the climax, and this is falling action. Of course, this when conflict is introduced, you have rising action as well. So this is the falling action, and this is the denouement resolution. Anyway, yes. What you see here, this is not something we talked about in the previous session. This is basically another shape of the pyramid that we talked about. So this is actually a more interesting one because this is more relevant. This is maybe something you see in most movies and in most books. So in here, as you can see, this, like each of these stories talk about, each of these stories, talks about only one incident. So for this one, it's the story, the environment is set up for the readers, or the watchers, people who observe, the observers or the readers, they are introduced to, they are exposed to, they are introduced to the environment. This is where the exposition happens. And this one incident, here is where the conflict is introduced, and here is the rising action happens. If we number those, maybe I should. So let's call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is, let's make it clearer. This is where the exposition happens. This is where you are introduced to the environment, to the setup of the story. This is where the conflict happens. This is where you are introduced to a conflict, or the incident is incited. This is where rising action happens. Things either if things have been happening or have been going really well, this is where they keep going really well, and to reach the climax, which is the highest point, going well or going badly. Anyway, so this is where the climax happens. You see, as soon as this story or this incident reaches its falling action state or falling action part, you will notice that something else has, another incident has been happening as well. And then if you go and read this story again, then you will see that the setup for this incident was actually done when here the kind of the step or the different stages like conflict, rising action, and the climax was when these different stages were happening in this story. You'll see that there is another incident set up. There is a setup has been done for another incident. This is what you usually see in series. So in series, you see one conflict, and then that conflict almost rises, so it keeps rising, and then you'll see, oh, there is another conflict almost being introduced. And then as soon as this conflict is almost resolved or settled, you will see that another conflict is going to reach its climax. That's why people, that's when you kind of, you keep staying excited to see what is going to happen next. That is that. And then again, so when this first story is almost resolved, you will see another setup and another conflict and the rising action. No. This is what you will see. And this one is a better picture, because in here, you will see that there is this main, or this really great incident that the whole book or movie or a series is set up or based on, is why the story is why the movie is taking place. So you see the setup. This is where the setup happens. This is where you are exposed to the environment within the story, within the movie, within the book. And this is where the conflict or the incident is incited. And you will know that this incident is something that you are really concerned about throughout the book, throughout the movie. But there are some really small. This conflict is something that you might think about a little bit, but this is not the greatest conflict or the greatest kind of point of concern within that story. That is that. And yeah, so this is the highest point of tension or the climax. And from this stage, if things have been going really well, they start going really badly. And if things have been going really badly or very badly, then this is where things will start going well. Okay, that is that. But if you have any question, please do let me know in the chat box. I hope I can see your messages. Please let me check that. Yes, I can. Okay. So if you have any question, please do let me know in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll continue and talk about today's session. In today's session, continuing this reading comprehension of fiction texts. So we'll continue to talk about what a fiction text has, what all the fiction texts have. And one of the things that you will see in any book or any text, any fiction text, of course, this is the case in nonfiction as well, but we'll focus on the fiction part of it. Number one is characterization. Characterization is basically how a character is described, either through dialogue or action, which is either directly or indirectly. And the next one is figurative language. Figurative language, unlike literal language, which you use every day. So this, like on its own, does not have a specific meaning. You can't really find out its meaning unless you are aware of its context, or the sentence that is used. Anyway, that's today's session. Now let's go on. So the first one is characterization. Characterization, as I said, is how characters in a story are described, either directly or indirectly. So if you look at any story, it doesn't really matter whether it's a movie, a book, or even when your friend tells you a really short story about something, each story has characters. If it's about one person, then it has a character, it has setting, and it has events. Events meaning that it has inciting incident when something happens. It has rising action when something, when the tension keeps growing. It's tension, or maybe it's a good thing, then the goodness keeps growing. But if it's a bad thing, then the tension keeps growing. And you will see climax. Every story has that. I went to the mall and then I saw this sneaker and I really liked it. Oh, this person going to the mall is when the incident is incited, and seeing a sneaker is when something happens, and then really liked it, and then this keeps growing. Anyway, so any story has that: characters, setting, and events. So, and in any story, narration is when the narrative speaks, or when the narrator speaks. So, narration is done. Okay, narration is when dialogues are not happening, or when characters within the story are not speaking. That's when the narrator speaks. So, for instance, Sarah lives in Jakarta. Sarah living in Jakarta is not something, this is not said by anyone. This is just, the narrator telling you, giving you information, giving you, the reader, of course, information about the setup of the story. And because this is something we have talked about first person, second person, and third person point of view, then we don't need to really go through that again. But any narrator within a story has the job of eliminating the communication barrier. So, because if you read a book and it has something like, so for instance, let's call this, so Ahmad. Ahmad said, I don't like football. Well, that's not. See, I don't like football. I don't like football. I said I don't like football. So, and then John started, screaming, why? Tim is not here. It's not here. Ahmad doesn't like football. What's the point? Point of bringing him? Okay. Now you read this story and you're like, wait, what is happening here? I don't really understand. What? I was saying like football. John started screaming, why Tim is not here? What? Wait, what? You are confused. That is the job of the narrator, to eliminate the confusion. And that's when you will see, like when you are reading something, that's when you see quotation marks, like Ahmad said, and then there is a comma, and then, quotation mark starts, and then, oh, I don't like football. John started screaming, there is a comma, why Tim is not here. Ahmad doesn't like football. What's the point of bringing him? Right? This is when you will understand what the characters are saying. So when a character does something, so if I point out, this is, oh, that's simple. Change the color. Let me use this. So this is a dialogue. So in this really short, text, you can certainly see that this is when the narrator speaks. So when the narrator says something, John started screaming. This is not said by anyone in any one of the characters. So why? And then again, this is a dialogue. So anyway, narrator's job or role in any story is to eliminate the communication barrier between the story, of course, and the reader. So when you see a dialogue is something like this. When characters within the story speak, that's when dialogues happen. If you remember our story about Sarah and Tim, in Tim's story, when Tim had the heart attack, Tim's granddaughter actually screamed, "Mom, come on, Grandpa, it seems really hurt." That's the dialogue. And quotation marks are used to indicate dialogues happening among the characters within a story. Excuse me. The next one is direct or indirect, direct characterization or explicit characterization. Direct characterization is basically when a character is explicitly described. So, for instance, when you read a story and the narrator says that, oh, describe meaning that when a character trait is given to a character within a story. So, for instance, say you have character traits like smart, well, smart, lazy, right, crazy, uh, stupid, really fast. Oh, fast, slow. These are character traits. Angry, happy, sad. You have positive and negative character traits, of course. But anyway, so when a character is explicitly described by the author or by the narrator, that's when you say that this is a direct or a direct characterization. So Tim is very smart. Very smart. He solved the calculus question question. How do you write that? Question within seconds. You see, in here, you can see that Tim is very smart. Okay, great. We know that he has done this. He has solved the calculus question within seconds. He must be smart. But is he extremely smart, or is he part of a book smart? So that's 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 a different discussion anyway. So when you see a writer or a narrator strictly describing a character, that's when you know that it's a direct characterization. This statement right here is a direct characterization. Unlike implicit characterization or indirect characterization, this is when character traits, or as I said, these character traits, not just these, of course, all the character traits are revealed through actions. It's up to you, the reader, to understand and really catch on what kind of person they are. So in indirect characterization, you will see actions. So Jim lied to his brother about well, about going out. Night. So Jim lied to his brother about going out at night. Oh, from then, from this statement by the narrator, we know that Jim's action is mentioned here, but it's not directly stated that Jim is a liar, but the action here tells us that Jim is a liar. And then if we add maybe something else to this story saying that, okay, Jim is afraid of his brother. because he gets beaten every time he goes out at night. Of course, beaten by him, by the brother. Goes out at night. Okay, this at night. So in this really short text narration by the narrator, we know that Jim is afraid of his brother, and we also know that his brother is abusive, physically abusive. And this could be stated in a way that, okay, Jim is afraid of his brother because his brother is abusive, and then could go on and talk about him beating Jim after going, or every time he goes out at night. But anyway, but we see that the brother is not explicitly described, or the brother's character is not explicitly described or directly described, but it's indirectly or indirectly characterized or described. The character is indirectly described. Before we move on, narration is the story and the story happening, and when the narrator narrates the story, a narrator is the person responsible or the writer, and the narrator's job or role is to get rid of the communication barrier between the story and the reader. Dialogue is when characters within a story speak with one another, communicate verbally, of course, and question marks, not question marks, quotation marks. So quotation marks is used to convey, or is used to directly quote characters' dialogues. And a direct characterization is when a character is directly described, or when a character trait is directly given to a character within a story, and explicit, of course. This basically means clearly stated. You have indirect characterization. This is when a character's trait, or a specific trait, is revealed through that character's actions. And that is implicit characterization or indirect characterization. And now let's look at these examples. So if you read these examples, then you will know that you will see that we have to be able to answer the questions like, what character trait does Patrick demonstrate? Characters like, is he rude, stupid, lazy, crazy, smart, whatever. Let's read this, and if you have any response, so if you have any questions, of course, please feel free to write down your questions in the chat box. Next meeting is the last meeting. No, the next meeting is not the last meeting. This is session 10. We'll have another, another 6 sessions. This is the last session about fiction text. In the next session, we are going to talk about some grammatical rules, some grammatical mistakes that people make, or some common ones, and I will go through some of the most important grammatical points in English. So from now on, if you are kind of concerned about grammatical mistakes that you make, so you should definitely keep attending these sessions. I will say so. I will explicitly state whenever it's the last session. And this is not last session. We'll have another 6 sessions. Anyway, let's read these stories. So these are different stories, by the way. This is not one story. Okay, so this is story number 1, and this is where we are supposed to answer this question. This is story number 2, and this is where we are expected to answer this question, and this is story number 3. Let's read the first one. When Caitlin got to Patrick's apartment, she noticed a foul smell. Foul smell, basically kind of really bad smell. She looked around and saw several half-filled cans of soda and some uncooked chicken breasts that had gone bad in a pan in the kitchen. She also noticed that all the lights and televisions were on and that Patrick wasn't home. So what do you think? What character traits can we see in here? Let's break down this story into different parts. And let's start by, she noticed a foul smell. Basically, that's a yes. She looked around and saw several half-filled cans of soda. Half-filled, basically, or half empty. This actually tells us that Jim is wasteful. Jim wastes. Jim. This tells us that Patrick is wasteful. Demonstrates the trait of being wasteful. Yeah, he wastes cans of soda and some uncooked chicken breast that had gone bad. This is again him being wasteful. In a pan in the kitchen. She also noticed that all lights and televisions were on and that Patrick wasn't home. See, so when someone is not home, they turn off their lights. So Patrick, we know that Patrick, the character trait that Patrick shows here is being wasteful. Right? And then we also maybe see this kind of maybe a wasteful. We also can say that lazy. What else can we say? Write down in the chat box. Untidy, yes. Indisciplined, yes. You could say that spoiled. Yes, Patrick is spoiled. Is spoiled person. Messy. Yes, great. Yes, keep the responses coming, please. Then I'll know that you are following up and to understand what I'm talking about. Let's read the next story. So Miss Roberts noticed that Tierney had not been herself recently. She participated in this class, dressed in dark colors, and didn't want to friends that she had. Noticing these changes, Miss Roberts scheduled a conference after Tierney so that they could talk in private. So what character trait does Miss Roberts demonstrate? What do you guys think? Now let's break down this and see what kind of person Miss Roberts is. Okay. Hi, Liza. So we know that Miss Roberts, oh, that is bad. Let's erase this and let's highlight this. So we know that when Miss Roberts notices Tierney, we know that she is a really great observer. So she is observant. We know that. Had not been herself recently. She participated less in class. Yes, this is what this student Tierney is going through, dressed in dark colors and didn't want to associate with friends that she had at the beginning of the year. So noticing these changes, Miss Roberts scheduled a conference after school with Jenny so that they could talk in private. So does this and notices all these things, right? And then does this. What character trait does Miss Roberts demonstrate? This is not about Tini, by the way. So you have to, yes, we know that Tini is sad, maybe, or maybe this is just a new look. So we know this. So from the first one, we say that when we read that Miss Roberts noticed, it actually is that Miss Roberts says, a really great observant, perceptive. And also we know that after doing that, she is also dedicated to help her students. We know because first of all, we know she is perceptive because she noticed Tini not being herself recently. And yes, a caring teacher. Yes, she is observing, helpful, and she is a caring teacher. We know that she is, of course, caring and helpful. Also, she is observing or perceptive. So now let's read the third one. In the third story, we see that Lyle's cousin Ted works at a packing plant. After Lyle asked Ted to get him a job there several times, Ted went out of his way and got Lyle hired. The night before Lyle's first day, Lyle stayed up late hanging out with friends. Then he slept in and arrived at the packing plant at an hour late. During his training, Lyle was yawning and almost fell asleep on the line. Ted shook his head in disgust. So, what character trait does Lyle demonstrate? Now, let's break this down. So the first one is that, no, he does, okay. Highlighter. First he does this, and no, several times. And then Ted does something really great, but then Lyle does this. Stays up with his friends and arrives really late. And then he slept in and arrived at the packing plant an hour late. So, right, and during the training, he does this. Right? So now, and this actually makes Ted do this. So if this were about Ted, then we would say that, okay, Ted also is like Miss Roberts. He is a helpful friend. He's a good friend. We know that. So, but then this is about Lyle, and Lyle is a negative person. What negative characteristics can you think of? Traits can you think of when you think about this person? First of all, we know that I is careless, right? Is not careful with how he behaves. Or maybe you could say insensitive, yes. We know that Lyle is also what? He is careless, he is ungrateful, not kind of ungrateful. He is maybe careless is the only thing that we can understand from this text. Yes, he is naive and not concerned. He is dereliction. What do you mean by dereliction? So we know that Lyle is careless. We know that kind of naive, maybe from our senses, but it's not really stated here. Let's just say careless and also irresponsible, maybe. right? And also almost ungrateful because, Ted actually went out of his way to help him, but he is not paying the help really well, not paying the help back really well. And from now on, when Ted introduces new people to the employers, they might not trust Ted because of this, this Lyle guy or what Lyle did. Anyway, so now it's time for you to practice. So when you go there, you will see questions just like here. You will see different actions uh, done by the characters within a story. These are the three stories that you will answer the questions on Mentimeter for. And before we go to the next slide, please open your Mentimeter and be ready. So I hope you have gone to, if you have the Mentimeter application, just open it and write down this code, 96825438. And if you're not on Mentimeter app, or if you don't have the application, just go to mentimeter.com and participate in this really small quiz through this code again. Okay, so I hope you are ready and your time starts now. Okay, that's it. Now your time is up, and I hope you have responded. Now let's go and see your responses. So for the first one, you said that what character trait does Brandt demonstrate? Now let's go to the previous slide to see and read this. I will read each of them and we'll go to the relevant slide. So the first one is the home team was down 3 points, and it was the last play of the football season. The Courage decided to go for the win. The ball went to star running back Grant Parker. Grant easily maneuvered around the defenders, juked through a stiff arm, and made it to the other side of the field. Right before crossing into the end zone, Grant did a little shuffle. He was so into nailing the that he did not notice that the opposition had hit him so hard that he stumbled. And if we go to the slide, the question is, what character trait does Brandt demonstrate? You have said he's so focused that he didn't notice anything. Focus maybe, but that is kind of looking at a half empty glass as if it's half full. So careless, kind of yes. Self-thinking, okay, careless, not focused, careless, responsible. Around the defenders. Okay, character trait is either, you could say something like Brandt is selfish, he's a show-off, he didn't need to do the shuffle, so he's a show-off, he's careless, and he is, yes, irresponsible. Yep. Raised farm. Okay, so the character trait that Brandt in this story demonstrate is he's a show-off. He is maybe overconfident. He is also stupid for trying to shuffle during a moment that certainly did not need that. Oh, he did not need to show off his skills. Anyway, now let's go to the next slide. So what character trait does Amy demonstrate? Now let's go and read this story. Amy does not like hanging out with Kathy. She thinks that he is an he. This should be she, by the way. Kathy is okay. So she thinks that she is annoying. One day, Kathy called the radio station and won backstage passes to see pop music superstar the Mountain Boys. When Kathy asked Amy if she wanted to go to the concert with her, she agreed, saying that it would be a great time. Amy was very nice to Kathy until the concert. After the concert, she treated her the same way that she always had. So what character trait does Amy demonstrate? So she doesn't like hanging? No. Where did you get that from? She is a hypocrite? Yes. She is selfish? Yes, Amy is selfish. A rude person? Yes. Yeah, certainly rude, yes. Traitor? Yeah. Selfish and ungrateful? Selfish, yes. Ungrateful? Also ungrateful, yeah, I could say. Compassionate, good heart, sharing? That would be Kathy. Kathy is a sharing person, someone who shares what she has with the person she kind of thinks to be her friend. But Amy, in here, Amy is, of course, first of all, she is, okay, not here, let's go to the slide. First of all, she is deceptive because she was nice to Kathy until the concert, right? So she is deceptive. And also she is rude. She is really rude, and as you mentioned here, she is selfish. Now let's go to the next one. what character trait does Kiki demonstrate? And let's go and read this story. So today was Kiki's first day at high school. She was overwhelmed by the size of the building. As she passed by the fire alarm, one of the seniors struck up a conversation with her. Do you know that we have a fire drill today? Kiki said that she did not know that. The senior then convinced her that the principal was running late and that he would give her a reward if she pulled the fire alarm for him. Wanting to make a good impression on the older students and the principal, Kiki pulled the fire alarm. She was suspended for a week. Ah. So, what character trait does Kiki demonstrate? She passed by the high school. Okay, the question is not what she did. The question is what character trait does she demonstrate? Innocent? Yes. Say that. Naive? Certainly naive, yes. Yes. Pity? No. No, not childish and selfish, no. Could say stupid, yes. Naive and simple, yes. Careless? No, not careless, because she cared about impressing, giving a good impression, or having a really great impression on the principal and the older students or the senior students. So yeah, she is naive, she's simple, she's too trusting maybe. Yes, you shouldn't really trust someone you have just met. Okay, I think that's it for all these stories. Now let's go to the next slide. By the way, if you have any questions and you don't want to write them down in the chat box, please feel free to write them down through this Mentimeter code, and I will certainly try to answer them if we have time. So now it's 4 o'clock, and now let's go to the next part of the session, which is a really complicated topic, figurative language. Figurative language basically means a language that you have to figure out. So you have literal language. You have literal, and you have figurative. Literal basically means any literal language basically means exactly means exactly what's stated. And an example for this would be like I like the color black, or that car is fast, or she is absent today. Right? So this is literal language. This is the type of language that means exactly what's stated. There is no confusion here, right? So we know what each of those sentences means. We know that. Now, figurative language, on the other hand, you have to figure out the meaning. Figure out the meaning. Okay. So now you have that. The examples would be, light as a feather. We know that that is not true, and they should be, you have to know the context as well. What is light as a feather, right? So anyway, so for figurative language, you have to figure out meaning, you have to know the different types to know what they mean and why they're used. So the first one is the hyperbole. And hyperbole basically is when a writer exaggerates. So when someone, a writer or a speaker, given that you are reading or listening to someone, reading someone's text and listening to someone's speech. So this is when the writer exaggerates, right? So this is, for instance, you would say that that person has no self-control, right? So you can say that, okay, my friend is always bored. That is, maybe your friend is bored. Sometimes saying that he's always bored is exaggeration. So this is when the writer or when the speaker exaggerates for emphasis and effect. So when you want to say that he's bored most of the time, instead of that, you say that he's always bored. Oh, he's never ready. My friend is never ready. This is something. Oh, I don't want to say that anyway. So you could say that maybe for this lesson, if you find this lesson to be boring, you could say that, okay, this lesson is taking forever. That is not true. That is an exaggeration, of course, to say the least. But yeah, that is hyperbole. And hyperbole basically is part of driven from two words. So the first one is hyper. Hyper is a Greek word. It basically means beyond or over. Bole basically kind of means throw. So hyperbole, and when they come together and form hyperbole, basically means overthrow, not in its literal sense, of course, kind of what the translator says, but kind of exaggeration. It's the exaggeration. Right? Okay. This is when the writer or speaker exaggerates for emphasis or effect. Sometimes you might say that I have seen this movie 10,000 times. Really, have you now? That is, of course, an exaggeration. Now let's look at some examples. Yes, this is something I said. The person has no self-control. That, of course, might have, really weak self-control. Has no self-control is an exaggeration. Nothing can bother him. That is definitely an exaggeration. My dad is always working. These shoes are killing me. I am starving. The lesson is taking forever. So you never have anything interesting to say. You're always bored. You're always angry. Those are exaggerations. And so number 5, I can smell pizza from a mile away. Really? Can you? Yeah. So this is hyperbole. When a writer or a speaker uses a very exaggerated form of trait, then that is hyperbole. So the next one is a metaphor. Metaphor basically is used when a writer or a speaker wants to compare two separate things without using the word like or as. You could say that, she was fairly certain that life was a fashion show, right? So you can say that the promise between us was a delicate flower. Ah, that is beautiful, isn't it? So you could say that your eyes enlighten my world, right? So you are you are the apple of my eye. You are the light of my eyes. Anyway, this is a metaphor when a comparison is made without using the word like or as. So she cut him down with her words. So what does it mean? As you can see, the comparison in here, like cutting down with words, the comparison between word, maybe a word, is done here. The computer in the classroom was an old dinosaur. So the age of the computer is compared with an old dinosaur. Laughter is the music of the soul. So laughter is music of the soul, right? So, and she let such beautiful pearls of wisdom slip from her mouth without even knowing. And here you can see that pearls of wisdom. Pearl is something physical and wisdom is an idea. But anyway, so you say that when someone says something really nice, say, oh, she let such beautiful pearls of wisdom. You have let such beautiful pearls of wisdom slip from your mouth. And we are all shadows on the wall of time. This is a kind of a comparison between shadow, time, right? Shadow, like any wall, has shadow, and in here, time is kind of compared to the wall, and we're all compared to shadows of that wall. So now, personification is the next one. Oh, this one for metaphor. By the way, this is really common. I'll certainly have a quiz set up for this. So you have to know the most common metaphors, and I'll certainly share some with you on Notion, of course. So personification. Uh, yes, of course, yes, I'll certainly share descriptive words for your learning. Yes, we'll maybe from session 12 onwards, I'll share some glossary, some really, there are maybe 1,000 words, 1,000 common words and 3,000 common words. And some common grammatical mistakes, some common grammatical rules that you have to remember. Anyway, I'll certainly share different resources with you. Personification is when the speaker or the writer gives like human characteristics, give to basically human traits to an object or an idea. So humans can be kind, can be crazy, lazy, blind, deaf, something like that. So this is when a writer uses maybe you can see something like love is blind. So love is not a human. How can love be blind, right? So blindness is a human trait. So a human can be blind. Animals can be blind. But love is something other than these two different things. So you could say that justice is blind, sometimes deaf. You could say that money is the only friend I can count on, right? Maybe that's not true, but anyway. So you could say that, the buses can be impatient around here. So when you go to a bus stop and the buses, they move really fast and they don't wait for you, then you could say that the buses can be really impatient around here. So he sang a lonely song to the moonlight. Isn't that the example? You could say that the moon smiled at me the other day. So it seems like basically when something other than human beings uh, is given a human characteristic, a human quality, or a human trait, that is personification. So you could say that these streets are talking about you. Streets can't talk, right? So the night told me about you, or the silence. Anyway, so this is really poetic. You will see this in poems. The examples for this one is this city never sleeps. City in here is given a characteristic that belongs to humans. The trees dropped like the trees dropped their leaves and rested. Resting is a human characteristic. I overheard these streets talking about you. Streets talking, the streets can't really talk. But in here, talking is a human characteristic, and streets, the word streets is given that characteristic. So any trust I had for him walked right out the door. So of course we know that trust is not something that can walk. Anyway, so walking is a human characteristic, and in this example, it's given to trust. The clouds pushed each other around in the sky. Pushing, of course, each other around is a human characteristic, something humans do, or of course other animals. Any intelligent being, or things that move. On their own, they can push each other. Clouds cannot. Clouds themselves are pushed by the wind. But anyway, in this example, the characteristic pushing around is given to the object. How? So similarly is a comparison between two unlike things using the word like or as. You know, here I said in the previous slide, that is so many slides backwards that I can't really go back. But anyway, I said light as a feather. He is light as a feather, right? So the handshake felt like a warm laundry. So that is a really interesting statement. No, your eyes looked like a welcoming. Anyway, so this is when you use like, you say, okay, like, you are like something else. But by the way, this, when you see like or as, only consider it to be a simile when you see comparison. Right? Sometimes you see, okay, I like pizza. This is not a figurative language. This is a literal language, and there is no comparison, right? You can say that I like pizza as much as the next man is. I like pizza as much as I like maybe, what else do people like? Burgers, maybe. So this is when you see a comparison, right? Anyway, when comparisons are made between two things using like, unlike metaphor, you see. So in metaphor, we saw that she cut him down with her words. In this, maybe if you change this to a simile, this would be something like her words cut him down like a sword, right? So you could say that the computer in the classroom was an old dinosaur. If you change this to a simile, you could say that the computer was as old as a dinosaur. So this is, well, and these are the examples. When he reached the top of the hill, he felt as strong as a steel gate. You know, this person's feeling is actually compared with a steel gate. The hair was as soft as a spider web. That was interesting. So softness of the hair is compared with spider web. I am about as awesome as a flying giraffe. We know that flying giraffes don't exist, but the awesomeness between this person, or this person's awesomeness, is compared with a flying giraffe's awesomeness, which we all can agree that if they did exist, it would be really awesome, wouldn't it? So now her laughter was like a warm blanket for a familiar song, right? So the warmth of the laughter is compared with a blanket for a familiar song. So the man held the blanket like a mirror. So we know that in here, so the holding of the blanket is compared with holding a memory, which we all do. So that's that. The understatement is really easy. You'll certainly see this in GED. And this is when a writer basically kind of understates the seriousness of something. So they express them kind of with less force than you would expect. Some examples for this would be you could try to swim across the Pacific Ocean, but it would be a little tiring and there might not be enough time to do it this afternoon. We know that this is an understatement. You can't really swim across the Pacific Ocean, right? But it'd be a little tiring. It would be, of course, it would be stupid. I would certainly kill you. And there might not be enough time to do it this afternoon, right? And you see that kind of, the idea of swimming across the Pacific Ocean is understated here. While in fact, the statement should have been like, you can't really swim across the Pacific Ocean. So jumping into a frozen lake will cool you down all right. And again, jumping into a frozen lake. First of all, a frozen lake cannot be jumped into. That's that. And then will cool you down all right. Will freeze that person to death instead of cooling that person kind of a little bit, just like here, all right. We know that the cooling down effect of a frozen lake is understated here. In essence, like torture can be uncomfortable at times. Really. So torture can be uncomfortable at times. So this is certainly understated. This is understatement. And we know that torture actually can kill you. That would be maybe the right way to say it without overstating or understating it. So getting hit by a speeding car might leave a mark. So getting hit by a speeding car might leave a mark is an understatement. Will certainly become fatally injured, or it might believe. Anyway, these are all understatements, and snails don't rank among the fastest of animals. You know that the snails are really, really slow, like too slow to be even considered for fastness. But anyway, so the speed of snail in here is kind of the slowness, maybe, of a snail's speed is understated. Instead of saying that snails are the slowest animals, it's said that snails don't rank among the fastest of animals. The last one, of course, is figurative. This is idioms are really interesting in the sense that sometimes we kind of misunderstand idioms. We think that, okay, something should either be hyperbole, metaphor, personification, some might understand them to idiom. But usually the case is that, so when you read idioms, you will see that all the idioms kind of fall under one of these categories. And one of these examples, by the way, idioms are really common and native speakers use them all the time. Excuse me. And mostly native speakers who are not really familiar with these names, so the kind of their academic names, they don't even know that they use idioms. So we'll see that, when you say, "Oh, he was pulling my leg," so in its literal sense, it means like pulling someone's leg, but just basically means joking, right? So when someone comes and you are speaking about that person, you're like, "Oh, speaking of the devil," of course that person is not a devil, right? And that is a metaphor, of course. So these are some examples. So Bob's new corner office was just the icing on the cake. Icing on the cake, right? It's a metaphor. So the office here is compared without using like or as. So after eating candy, Billy ran around like a chicken with his head cut off. That is a simile. You see that like is used here. So that new car cost an arm and leg. That is hyperbole, of course. That is exaggeration. No car is that expensive. But anyway, Tom said that he changed, but actions speak louder than words. That is personification, and that is of course, this object, or this maybe, I don't know what this is, but anyway, this is given the characteristic, or the human characteristic of speaking louder than words. So he did it at a drop of a hat. That is, of course, hyperbole. And when someone does something really fast, you know, that. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to. This is type something figurative, or type some figurative language. We don't have enough time for that, unfortunately. We will certainly come back to this. But if you do have any questions, please go to this Mentimeter code, go to Mentimeter and write down this code and write down your questions as well. I will certainly try to answer all of them. That is that. And thank you. This is the end of session 10. To clarify, we have 6 sessions remaining. Yep, thank you so much. And this is it.
Okay, thank you so much for the insightful session. We'll see you again on the next session. So, early this event, we had a question of the day. The question was, is it true or false test takers can use a calculator for the GED exam? And the answer is true. However, you can just use one type, and that is multi-fuse scientific calculator. It comes with your test, so you don't need to buy one and bring it with you. Shout out to Yelian Scott Tinapia from YouTube for answering correctly. Thank you so much for everyone who has participated to our question of the day. Make sure to stay tuned to our next QOTD to get a shout out from us. Now you may be wondering, how can I develop an awesome idea with a place like this? Very easy. Send your event proposals to us on our website at www.atamerica.or.id. Select create a program and go to collaborate with us. All the event proposals will be reviewed and your event might be featured here soon. While you are on our website, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to get our weekly event updates. You can also find us on our social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AT America. You can get fun content, giveaways, and so much more. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Aninda, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.